Here you have the Hermetica, so famous in occult circles, and sadly not studied as much as it should. Hermes Trismegistus, the myth, the legend, or maybe a composite of a real person. He was known as the Thrice-Great due to his knowledge of the most important disciplines of the ancient world, which would be alchemy, astrology, and theology. His notions about direct experience, knowing the self, as above, so below, are, again, pretty well known to those that are familiar with the topic. So I will do a quick overview of this excellent edition and give you some important information. So if you want to know more about it, stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Doing these things really helps the channel out. It allows it to grow. The algorithm will present it to other people, and if you like the content, it would really help out. I'll also put here on the screen my socials and my Ko-Fi account where you can get merch from the channel, and also you can donate a recurring amount or a single amount. Any of these things will really help me finance the project, and I really appreciate it. And for those who are new to the channel, every time I speak about a particular topic that I want to expand upon, give you more information about, I will put a note here below in that section which points to the show notes, and you can either pause it and read the show note or read it at the end or do whatever you want. It's just me expanding or giving you more information. Now, in this episode, again, I'm going over the Hermetica, the dialogues of Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus. And this edition is from Ouroboros Press from 2020. Now, I love Ouroboros Press. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I really do love their editions, but you can find other versions. I have a hardcover. There are very fancy editions of this as well, and soft covers. I will put in the pinned comment my Amazon affiliate link, in which I will put, whichever edition I find there for this particular collection, or a similar one if I can't find the same one. And content is king, so just get whichever one it's best for your budget. As long as it has a good translation and a good combination of books, you're going to be fine. Now, this particular edition has the Divine Pymander, which has 12 books within. Then you have the Emerald Tablet, very famous, and then the Virgin of the World. So it's a very nice collection of the primary works of Hermetica. And I have actually editions of all these books separately, but this one is very well made. And the combination, I think it's perfect. Now, this work is clearly a compilation of ancient Coptic and Greek wisdom, and it contains a wonderful reduction of these ideas. So it's not a very sophisticated treatise on most of these concepts. It is really written as both a philosophical and almost devotional style. Its structure is kind of like a Bible, like a primary source of philosophical aphorisms. So it is also built in a narrative sense or in a conversation style. Classic way of communicating important, deep things. So I'm not saying it isn't profound, I'm just saying it is not very complex. And therefore it's very accessible, which is a good thing. I can see why there are many commentaries and other works that will help you go even deeper into it. But the main book itself is very straightforward and not very long. The dichotomies here, the dualities, are established from the start. And you would think for an impersonalist model, which I consider Hermeticism to be, contrasting would usually serve only as a starting point, but the book does dedicate a lot of time to it at first, and I've always found that to be quite unusual. Probably you're seeing a development of concepts as it goes into impersonalism. One thing that has always stood out to me is the perception of concupiscence, the inclination towards evil in man, So it's a presupposition that you wouldn't assume in this system. And you also find a related concept, which is that the world can't be good because it is movable, it is changing. And this obviously is a very classic conception in philosophy, especially Neoplatonism, that anything that is changing cannot be truly good by their definition of good. But it also can't be evil if it is eternal, because it is sharing a quality of God, so that it is difficult to say both that it's evil and good because of these contrary dynamics. So it is not similar to Christianity in that sense because it is not positing an either or. Nonetheless, there are obviously similarities there as well. Now again, similarities don't mean sameness or shared sources. That would be fallacious. But I am nonetheless connecting the dots because culturally, as a Westerner, it's difficult not to. Now, I've always found the Hermetic Trinity to be very particular and important to consider, again, because of connecting the dots here with ancient Christianity and even current Christianity. So you have God the Father, then you have the world, which is his Son, and then you have man, which is an emanation, a manifestation, a creation of the world. So obviously it contrasts with the Christian Trinity, and there are other trinities like the Trimurti in India, where you have creation, destruction, and the middle point, which would be sustenance. So trinities are very common in most ancient philosophical systems and theological systems. But here it manifests in a particular way. Now, to be clear, when I say the world, it means the universe, the material universe, the manifestation that we perceive. That would be the sun. So obviously very different from Christianity. And I'm going to read a quote in relation to this in particular that I think will even clarify further. Quote, "The Lord and author of all things, whom we call God, brought forth a second God, visible and sensible. I describe him thus, not because he himself has sensibility, for this is not the place to treat such a question, but because he is perceptible to the senses. Having then produced this unique being who holds the first rank among creatures and the second after himself, he found his offspring beautiful and filled with all manner of good, and he loved it as his own child. He willed then that another would be able to contemplate this being so great and so perfect, whom he had drawn forth from himself, and to this end he created man endowed with reason and intelligence." So you can see there very similar formula to what would be considered the Christian metaphysic, the Trinitarian conception. But of course, there are also clear contrasts here. So this notion of the only begotten Son being the universe is different than the Logos, because the Logos is through which the divinity in the Christian model creates. Whereas in this case, the creation itself would be the begotten Son, so that makes it very different. But it is tempting to make a connection there, but keep in mind that these ideas are all contemporaneous. So it's not like the Hermetica is anterior to Christianity or anything like this. These are all concepts that are kind of in flux and relating to each other at the time. You had the Neoplatonists already, and you have Christians putting some pressure against the Neoplatonists and utilizing similar terms, but not applying the same definitions to the terms. So you do have some exchange there, but I wouldn't say that there is a direct correlation between them, or that there is necessarily a direct relationship to them. If there is something further than that, put it in the comments if you suggest a book that would actually make the case of the Hermetica being either anterior or being somehow connected to Christianity beyond just similar terms. I'm very willing to consider that. I just haven't seen evidence for it. So I consider these systems to be legitimately separate, even if they share similar milieu or time frame or conceptual basis. Another notion here that is quite fascinating is the idea that God cannot be apparent. since all apparent things must be made. And again, very classic Neoplatonist concept. God cannot be perceived, can be conceptualized, and you can only know God through his effects. And as many of you will know, this is very similar to the Western conception of divine simplicity and how God can never be really grasped unless you perceive the effects. Now, this is different in Orthodoxy because you have the essence energy distinction, but in traditional so-called paganism, you would have something like panentheism and pantheism, etc., in which you don't need to have this philosophical dilemma because everything in the universe is God. But the Hermetica is not quite in that position. It's almost in a hybrid between the external deity and the internal deity. To further expand on that, I'll give you another quote. And there is nothing therein through all the eternity of the revolution, neither of the whole nor of the parts which doth not live. For there is nothing dead that either hath been or is or shall be in the world. For the Father would have it, as long as it lasts, to be a living thing, and therefore it must needs be God also. How therefore, O Son, can there be in God, the image of the universe, in the fullness of life, any dead things? For dying is corruption, and corruption is destruction. How then can any part of the incorruptible be corrupted, or of God be destroyed? So you can clearly see in that quote a semblance of panentheism or pantheism. And I choose both terms there because it's not quite clear, so it could be one or the other in some way or shape. But at the same time, it holds God in a very extremely external position as well. So again, like I say, seems to be in a hybrid spot. And this points to an issue with the text. Some of the notions are jumbled, like when it asserts that what is made can't be separated from what made it. But this link has huge implications for its other doctrines, like absolute divine simplicity, again, which they seem to hold, but at the same time, creation and the creator seem to be inseparable, and that would be inconsistent with divine simplicity. So it's either that these two ideas are somehow hermeneutically applied in a strange way to try to harmonize them, or they are really legitimately two different schools of thought. They have jumbled and mixed up their ideas in a single book, and therefore they can't be really harmonized. That's really more up to you. Read the book and you can come back and put in the comments what you think about that. Now, the idea that souls will be governed and judged by their desires and their behaviors and how these desires manifest is quite common in almost every religion, but it adds the reincarnation element, which is obviously similar to many other cultures that had reincarnation in one way or the other, but obviously it makes me think of the Vedic schools. The soul always returns and looks for a vessel. And as a matter of fact, I'll give another quote just for this particular point. And Isis answered in this wise, a man who acts against reason, a beast which eludes necessity, a reptile which forgets its cunning, a fish which loses its timidity, a bird which renounces freedom. Thou hast heard what was to be said concerning the hierarchy of souls, their descent, and the creation of bodies. O my son, in every order of souls there are found a few royal souls, and of diverse characters, some fiery, some cold, some proud, some gentle, some crafty, some simple, some contemplative, some active. This diversity belongs to the regions from whence they descend into bodies. From the royal zone, the royal souls go forth, but there are many royalties, the royalty of spirit, of the flesh, of art, of science, of the virtues. So you can see there hierarchies, a conception of different dimensional realities for souls, and judgment for behavior and for desires, etc. So a clear system that it's fair to call a religion. And there's also a prophetic component and apocalyptic predictors in the book, which also fulfills basic characteristics of a religion. For example, quote, Strangers will fill the earth, and not only will sacred things be neglected, but more dreadful still, religion, piety, and the adoration of the gods will be forbidden and punished by the laws. Then this earth, hallowed by so many shrines and temples, will be filled with sepulchres and with the dead. O Egypt, Egypt, there will remain of thy religions only vague legends which posterity will refuse to believe. Only words graven upon stones will witness to thy devotion. The Scythian, the Indian, or some other neighboring barbarian will possess Egypt. Divinity will return to heaven. Humanity thus abandoned will wholly perish, and Egypt will be left deserted, forsaken of men and of gods. I actually love that prophecy, and it's very poignant actually when you ponder on it. It is important to point out that even though it is in its application an apophatic system and impersonalist in some sense when you view the results, it makes it clear also that there is no void and that all is filled, since there can't really be any spaces between creation and divine because everything is kind of connected. So it is important because most impersonalists tend to be voidist of some kind, but clearly this is not the case with the Hermetica, and I think it's fair to point that out. Finally, there is a notion that both joy and sorrow are evil due to their impermanent nature, and this is very similar to Vedanta as well. But key here is the fact that you find the ideas that resemble conceptualism, and it's very rare to find this in the ancient world. As we know, nominalism, conceptualism is a pretty recent phenomena, philosophically speaking. But here you have the notion that nothing on earth is real, and you can only find appearances and opinions in the universe, in the material world. That the true reality, the true universal lies in God. Now, of course, that means it is not conceptualist and it's not nominalist, but the inclination to give reality only to the universals beyond the impermanent is an interesting link to eventual solipsism and the horrors of the modern world with postmodernism, etc. So all in all, an important book to study and to know if you wish to contrast and understand the modern world and occultism in general. I don't think it's possible to be well educated in philosophy or theology and any of these things without really having read this book and at least reading it a couple times and understanding it. So, important book to study, great edition, and hopefully you can get a copy. I'll put that link in the pinned comment, and hopefully you enjoy it and you can come here and comment. I'll be more happy to read your comments. So please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.